Squid Game 2 is now up, and it's magnificent. There's some stuff I want to talk about in there, but before we get to that, let's quickly recap everything important that happened in Season 2, just so we're all on the same page. It starts right at the end of last season with 456 not getting on the plane. Then he cuts out his tracker. 2 years later, he's hiding out in a sleazy hotel-y spot. He's hired the loan sharks to look for the recruiter. The detective is alive, but didn't tell anyone his brother is Frontman, and now he works as a traffic cop by day, and on weekends he looks for the island with the captain who found him in the ocean, and who obviously works for the Frontman. The loan sharks find the recruiter and follow him to a park. The recruiter taunts some homeless people. The cop spots 456, then traces his car to the loan shark office and finds out about the hotel. The recruiter captures the loan shark and is second in command. He kills the loan shark and then has a confrontation with 456, then kills himself. 456 finds an invitation on a dead recruiter's body. The detective arrives at the hotel and gets recruited into 456's gang. Number 11 works as a mascot in an amusement park. She's kind to a little girl with leukemia. 456 tries to get 67's mother out of North Korea so she can be reunited with her son and Sang-woo's mother. Number 11 goes to the same broker to find the daughter she left behind in North Korea, but he says he can't help her. A recruiter shows up to give her a Squid Game card. We find out the Frontman was a cop who was fired for taking bribes. Number 11 quits her job. The little girl collapses and the father rushes her to the hospital. Number 11 goes to check on the little girl, then accepts the Squid Game job and burns the picture the little girl gave her. 456 has a tracker put into his tooth. His plan is to either kidnap Frontman or go back into the game and let his mercenaries follow via the tracker. 456 goes to meet with Frontman, but his mercenaries have their tires shot out. So he has to be put back in the game where he can prove that the people being tortured don't deserve it. Number 11 goes back to her job as a Squid Game soldier. 456 wakes up in the Squid Game bunkhouse and meets 44, an evil witch. We check in with 120, a trans woman and a former Special Forces soldier. Also 333, a crypto scammer and his pregnant girlfriend 222. Notable as well is 100, the most debt-ridden man in the game, who will likely be important in Season 3, but for now serves only as the face of those who want to keep playing. The commander explains the rules, including that people can split the pot after each game rather than leaving with nothing. We meet 7 and 149, a mother and son team who offer comic relief and heartbreaking tragedy. 333 is confronted by Thanos the Rapper, who lost $500,000 on 333 scams. Detective has the boat captain take him and the mercenaries the loan shark hired to the island that 456's tracker is on. 456 runs into 390, his good friend who he tried to borrow money from in the Hell episode of Season 1. The mercenaries find 456's tracker in a bucket of worms that a fisherman is using, so they know their plan is a bust. Frontman goes to watch the red light green light from his room, leaving Black Square in charge of the game. 456 explains the rules to everyone and convinces them to follow his plan after a few people get shot. Number 11 sees the sick girl's dad on the playing field. He's player 246. Thanos gets high to deal with the stress, then murders 3 people by shoving them during red light. Player 444 moves during red light and gets shot in the leg. 456 and 120 try to rescue him, but then number 11 executes him with a headshot. Black Square is concerned about her actions. Detective and the mercenaries give up on the island and decide to wait until tomorrow to come up with a new plan. Back at the bunk room, 456 calls for a vote, and people are disappointed to learn that they're only going to get around $20,000 if they quit now. The vote is a tie until the last player decided to intervene. It's the new player 1, Frontman. People gather around to get tips from 456. Frontman tries to ingratiate himself with 456 by saying the presence of the previous winner in the game has convinced people that the games can be won. 100 has to keep the secret of Dalgona to a small group who hears him talking, but 456 won't agree. 149 turns out to be a midwife, and she tries to take care of 222. 388 joins 456's group. Thanos and his evil sidekick 124 attack 333, but he's rescued by Frontman, who easily beats both of them up. This convinces 388 and 390 that Frontman belongs in their team, but 456 is suspicious. Number 11 is haunted by seeing player 246. Frontman talks to 456 privately, explaining that he's in the game because his pregnant wife needs a liver transplant, and restates what we learned about him losing his job. In the surgery basement, the soldier who was wounding people discovers that number 11 killed everyone to keep their organs from being harvested. Black Square warns her not to interfere with the organ harvesting any longer. The detective tells his superiors about 456's plan in the tracker, but they don't believe him. The loan shark tells the boat captain everything that's going on with the detective. 456 is a nightmare about Dalgona going horribly wrong. 222 confronts 333, who only now finds out that she's still pregnant. The next game is a 6-legged race, and we follow 2 teams. The first of 5 is 120, 95, a small timid woman, the witch, and the mother and son. The second team is Frontman, 456, 390, 388, and 222. Also notable is Thanos recruiting 380, a skeptical young woman, and 125, a small timid man, to fill out his team. The goal is to complete 5 minigames while in a 6-legged race around a circle, all within 5 minutes. 2 teams compete simultaneously. Both teams that attempt it first fail and are shot. When one man isn't killed, number 11 executes him in the coffin to ensure his organs can't be used. 120's team plays next, and they win. After a montage of other teams winning and losing, it's 456's turn. Everything goes well until Frontman proves to have major trouble getting a top to spin. Then, on the last game, 456 almost misses the last kick of a sack until Frontman saves him. They win, but the other team fails and is shot dead. After the game, 124 tries to bully 125, but 380 defends him. 120's team bonds over their success in the game and agree to all get together after they vote to leave. Number 11 is attacked in her room by 2 soldiers who threaten to rape and murder her if she keeps screwing up the organ harvesting. In the next vote, Frontman chooses to leave, but enough people change their votes so that the game has to continue. 456 feels betrayed that 390 also chose to keep playing. In the bathroom, Thanos threatens 333, demanding that they all play long enough to get their money. 456 warns everyone that people might attack in the night, so they huddle up behind mattresses and keep watch. 124 and Thanos get high the next morning, and 380 warns 125 not to get involved with them, suggesting he won't last long if he doesn't trust the right people. They play a game of musical chairs where a number of people have to get to individual rooms within 30 seconds. Anyone left outside dies, and anyone in a room with the wrong number of people also dies. After the first round, it's 9 people per room, and all the main characters survive. 2 organ harvesters find a living victim and look to number 11 to see if she'll execute him. She doesn't. In the second round, it's 4 per room, so Frontman tells the rest of the team to get to safety while he finds other abandoned players to team up with. 456 waits until the last moment trying to see if Frontman got to safety, but does not spot him. 120's team abandons the witch, but she finds other players. After people are let out, number 11 notices that 246 is still alive. Frontman joins back up with the team. They're happy to see he survived. The next game is 3 people. 380 tries to get 125 to come with her and look for someone, but he betrays her to go with Thanos and 124. 7 is dragged away by 2 players, abandoning his mother, but she's rescued by Frontman and 456. Likewise, 120 and 95 are saved when 246 runs up to make them a trio. In the next round, it's 6 players. The 4 women stay together with 7 and 388. But, on the way to the room, 120 sees 95 get knocked to the ground. 120 tries to go and rescue her, but 333 pushes her into the room with 3 seconds left, and 95 is killed. 333 maintains that there wasn't enough time to rescue 95, so 120 leaving would have gotten everyone in the room killed, which is true, but everyone is still pissed at him. Frontman, 390, and 456 are fine, and now 246 is officially part of their team. In the last round, Frontman predicts the number will be 2 since there are 50 doors, and that will mean that exactly 100 people will move on to the next round. He's right, but when he and 390 get into a room together, there's already a single person inside it, so Frontman murders the guy to ensure that there's only 2 people in the room. 390 is understandably upset. Meanwhile, the organs are once again being harvested. The mercenaries are back to using the drone to search for the island. 333 tries to reconcile with 222 so he can use her money. It's up to $300,000 per player for his schemes. She is not into it. The witch curses 120's team. The mercenaries use the drone to spot a hatch on an island and go investigate it. The organ harvesters congratulate number 11 on staying out of the way, but she's clearly haunted. The mercenaries find the hatch, but it's just a disguised bomb and one of them is killed. The vote comes down to 49 to leave and 50 to stay, with Frontman being the 100th vote. 390 starts to tell 456 about Frontman killing someone, but then Frontman votes for the tie and he keeps his mouth shut. The commander announces that they'll re-vote in the morning. The 2 sides of the competition start getting aggressive, and 456 notices that they were given glass bottles with dinner and metal forks despite the meal obviously being finger food. In the bathroom, Thanos tries to bully 333 again, which leads to a fight in which 333 stabs Thanos to death. When the fight is over, everyone has learned that people killed outside the games also contribute to the pot, thus ensuring that there will be a fight that night. 456 recruits people to his plan. Let the fight happen and play dead. Then, when the soldiers come to clean up, attack them, take their guns, and assault the command center. Frontman points out that if all the best fighters on the leave side are playing dead and waiting to attack the guards, most of the deaths will be on their side. 456 says that sacrifices have to be made to stop the game. That night, one of the mercenaries finds the boat captain sabotaging the drone, so the captain stabs him and throws him overboard. Black Square learns that the organ harvesting is going great, but warns the conspirators to watch number 11. The fight starts. 124 takes Thanos' drugs and goes on a murderous rampage. He attacks 380, and although 125 could have tried to help, he instead hides and let her get killed. The rebellion starts. They kill the guards and take their guns, putting together an attack team of 456, Frontman, 120, 388, 390, 246, and others. With the guards on the run, 456 has to stop 47 from executing the people who wanted to keep playing, even though they're largely murderers. The rest of the guards, including number 11, are mobilized to put down the rebellion. They make it to the management area, but most of the team is pinned down by gunfire on the Escher stairs. 456 and 390 head into the final area before the command center, but are blocked by soldiers atop a staircase. Running low on ammo, 120 sends 388 back to get more from the pockets of the dead soldiers. Frontman takes 2 rebels to back up 456 and 390, promising to find a way behind the staircase guards. 388 grabs the extra ammo but collapses under the pressure and hides in a corner. 120 goes back to find out what happened to him. Frontman shoots the 2 rebels in the back, then radios 456, pretending the attack failed and faking his own death. The soldiers retake the bunkhouse. 120 wants to fight them, but the old lady stops her. Just 3 soldiers are left in the staircase. They run out of bullets and surrender. One of them is 246, who explains that his daughter is sick and asks not to be shot. He gets shot anyway. Frontman puts his costume back on and goes to talk to 456, then executes 390 in front of him, blaming the death on 456, trying to play a hero. So that's the season. A lot happened. So now let's talk about what it all means and what might be next. The key to understanding a lot of this season is the recruiter's actions in the first episode. As far as we can tell, he has 2 jobs: recruit people to the game, and when 456 finally catches him, send him to meet the Frontman. So what's with the bread and lottery? He explains when he's stomping on the bread. They all knew the rules. It's their fault that the food was being wasted. They made a choice, and this was the consequence. Except, that's not true. He could have given them both. He's the one making the rules, and they're responding rationally to the situation that he has put them in. A bread bun isn't even a whole meal. You'll eat it and you're going to be hungry again in an hour, maybe 2. The lottery ticket, on the other hand, could mean $10, $100, even $1,000. Food for a week or even a month, a place to stay for a little while, new clothes. He's coming to homeless people, offering them hope, and then blaming them for accepting it. The reason he's doing it, of course, is that he's lost it completely. He's become completely broken by the evil he's a part of, and he's trying to find a way to justify continuing to do his job. He's been told over and over again that people are worthless, they are fools to be used and discarded as need be, but he doesn't believe it anymore. And even seeing human misery in its rawest form can't allow him to justify his behavior any longer. He's already feeling this way, so when he sees the loan shark unable to condemn his friend to death, even at the cost of his own life, he realizes just how awful he's become. I firmly believe that he went into the room with 456 fully intending to die. While there's no obvious sign that his death was anything but random chance, his story about killing his own father makes it clear that he's suicidal, and it's just a question of whether 456 kills him or he does it himself. How could he manage this? Simple enough. He's looking at the cylinder when he spins it and flicks it into the gun. He knows where the bullet is. So it's just a question of whether it's the person on the odds or the evens who's going to die. But how could he plan the spin? That's the real trick here. He didn't need to, because he never established what the spin meant. The recruiter knew that the bullet was on 6, so he had the evens, which means he had to go second. So he spins the gun, and the barrel is pointing at 456. But that means that the handle is pointing at him, which can just as easily be justified as indicating that you should pick up the gun. So if the bullet had been at 5 or 3 or 1, and he needed to be odds, once the spin was done, he would announce that the handle was pointing at him and pick it up. It's not like 456 would have objected to somebody else going first. This is just like the magician's box trick. There are 4 boxes, and he knows where the ball is. So he tells you to pick 2, but he doesn't say whether picking 2 means that you're taking those boxes away or keeping them. Then he does some patter before asking you to pick 1, so that you've forgotten what picking a box means. And the next time you pick one, the magician can change it to mean whatever he needs it to. To 456, this looks like he won the game, but the recruiter was cheating to get his preferred outcome, just like Ilnam did in the first game, and like Frontman does for the rest of the season. And yes, Frontman is cheating. In the 6-legged race, his team goes last so that if they fail, no one will witness him not getting shot. In the second round of Mingle, he runs off to let the rest of his team find a door safely, so that he can disappear in the confusion, safe in the knowledge that even if he doesn't find a team, he won't be killed. And since we see him appearing out of nowhere after round 2, we can safely assume that he didn't team up with anyone. That's why it's so important for him to kill the man in the final round. Not so he can survive, but so he can keep his cover intact. Which brings us to our most important question of the season. The recruiter scenes in the first episode are important because they set up the arcs that Frontman and Number 11 are going through for the rest of the season. During the conversation in the limo, 456 points out that Ilnam died knowing that he lost, but he was so cowardly that he couldn't face it. Ilnam's last game was designed to prove the central worthlessness of humanity, and he lost. What 456 doesn't know is that Frontman was there listening to that conversation, and that Ilnam's failure shook Frontman to the core. Look at what we learn about Frontman this year. He was a police officer until his wife got liver cirrhosis and she needed a new liver, but she was also pregnant. He borrowed money from Ilnam to get her the operation, which led to him being fired from his job. Then his wife delayed treatment for her liver because she wanted to have the baby first, but her illness killed her before the baby was born. So Frontman was left with no use for the money that had cost him his career. As he sank into despair, Ilnam sent someone to recruit him to the Squid game, which he manages to win, but the money means nothing to him, so he has nothing left to live for. And his experiences in the Squid game left him even more traumatized and furious at the state of humanity than he already was. Impressed by his performance, Ilnam recruited him to run the games, and with nothing left to live for, he adopted Ilnam's ideology, which managed to keep him going right up until, in Season 1, he found himself face to face with the brother who never gave up on him, a symbol of everything he tried to shut away. He couldn't abandon himself entirely, though, which is why he's likely responsible for the detective's rescue at sea. Yes, it's possible that the captain was recruited after randomly finding the detective in the ocean, but let's face it, Frontman shot his brother in the shoulder to give him the best possible chance at survival, and he knew exactly where he fell into the ocean. He also has access to boats and could have sent someone out to rescue him. And let's face it, the captain is certainly down with stabbing people at a moment's notice. In all likelihood, he was always an employee of Frontman. Already shaken by the experience with his brother, he then witnesses Ilnam's ideology being questioned and defeated, leaving him adrift. So of course, he's happy to put 456 back in the game. He wants a chance to prove that 456 is wrong and Ilnam was right. But then 456 manages to save almost everyone during red light, green light, and he realizes things could actually turn against him. So he puts himself in the game to be in a position to sabotage 456 if it comes to that. This is why he's so worried when he's failing to throw the spinning top. Not because he's afraid of dying, but because he'll miss out on the chance to prove 456 wrong. If he screws up and they run out of time, the rest of the team will be killed and 456 won't see that he lost, which is the whole reason he put 456 back in the game. This is why he doesn't reveal his betrayal at the end, instead faking player 1's death. If he revealed himself to 456, then 456 would know that Frontman had been cheating, and it would invalidate their competition and Frontman's worldview. If nothing else, 456 plays by the rules, even if he's the only one who does. That was 67's dying message to him. Don't kill Sang-woo, because then you're just as bad as they are. So, what does Frontman want? He wants 456 to admit that Ilnam was right, and that people aren't worth saving. Ultimately, I suspect he wants 456 to take over running the games, or at least accept some role in managing them. He's proven himself to be an able motivator of people and a tactical thinker. Not only would he be a useful part of the team, if Frontman can get 456 to agree to the same deal he took, it would validate his own worldview. Of course, he'll always know that he had to lie and cheat to make it happen, so even getting exactly what he wants probably won't bring him any peace. Because she's separated out from the main cast, number 11 is a comparatively minor part of the second season, but all of the pieces are in place to suggest that she'll be a major part of season 3. The way we're introduced to her desperate living situation, we're primed to assume this is going to be another player, a new 67, essentially. So it's a huge reveal at the end of the second episode when it turns out that she's a soldier for the Squid game. The result is the audience now understands that there's not that much of a difference between the players and the workers. Her arc over the season is experiencing the exact same crisis of faith that the recruiter and Frontman are going through. She had a clear goal in mind. She was going to get her daughter back no matter what she had to do. that drive was exploited by Black Square, and he recruited her not just into the Squid Game, but into his conspiracy of organ harvesters. But now she's been told that there's no amount of money she can make that will locate her daughter. So what is she doing any of this for? When she sees player 246 willing to go to any length to save his own daughter, she sees herself, or at least what she used to be before she'd become hopeless. This is why she acts out by killing the wounded players. She no longer believes the lie that Black Square was telling her. When she needed money, she could look the other way. But now that she no longer cares about the money, she can see that everything she was told were just excuses by a man looking out for his own selfish interests. We can't say where her story is going to take her just yet, but don't be surprised if this moment, in which player 246 is shot, turns out to result in a non-fatal injury. The only question is whether that's number 11 shooting him non-fatally, or whether one of the other soldiers is doing it to get the organ harvesting back up and running, and she might go looking for him down in the secret surgery basement while everyone is still recovering from the rebellion. While the first Squid Game was largely about how capitalism turns people into desperate slaves and then blames them for what they've become, the second Squid Game is focused around the idea of how the rich corrupt democracy to keep the lower classes from seeing who's actually creating and benefiting from their misery. When the Squid Game starts in Season 1, there are 455 people competing for the money. But once the first game is done, they've been turned into a group of survivors who feel victimized by the organizers of the game. Some are desperate enough to stay, naturally, but it's no surprise that they vote to leave, even if it is by the slimmest possible margin. Nearly everyone comes back, of course. The game's managers have profiled their targets well. But it's still a risk. Just like there's no way to guarantee that there's going to be a brawl, the biggest plot error in the original series is when one of the guards mentions that they purposefully don't give enough food one night in order to provoke a conflict. But that's not what happens. 5 people steal an extra meal, and then there are 5 meals missing. And it's only because one of them is an absolute psycho that someone gets killed, and the villains discover that they can make money by killing one another outside the games. In the second season, the game's managers have come up with a much better solution to ensure conflict. Just label the players according to how they voted. Doing so creates a psychological incentive for them to self-sort into groups with competing interests. And by giving people a financial incentive to quit early, you encourage the one more game people to be more aggressive in their attempts to keep the game going. When everyone was left destitute by quitting the game, then everyone is suffering together. But if the people who want to quit the game are rewarded for having done so, then the people who want to keep playing will wind up feeling like money that should have been theirs is going to people who aren't even willing to risk their lives to get it. This is a recipe for even more aggressive resentment, ensuring that you don't even need a psycho murderer to make it into the game in order to get violence to pop off. By splitting the players into teams, one side of which is likely to have more aggressive and desperate players, not only do they guarantee conflict, but they ensure that the side that wants to keep playing is likely to win the fight. Most importantly, though, by creating teams, it gives the players someone to blame for their situation other than the people actually responsible for all the bloodshed and horror. There are a lot of guards, sure, but there are far more players. They could successfully rebel during the first half of the game. But because they've been encouraged to think of themselves not as a class of people with a common interest, but rather individuals in competition with one another, they never think to do so. It's only when someone who's already seen the natural endpoint of the game, everyone suffers and dies except for one person who gets rich, that they're able to cut through the facade that the game's managers have set up and actually fight back for that common interest. After proving his use by getting most people through the red light, green light game, 456 runs out of actionable intel about what's coming next, which weakens his position with the larger group. Unfortunately, during the 3 years since he played the Squid Game, he didn't notice a pattern in the games, that they were specifically designed and ordered to impress a psychological effect onto the players. If you look at the original 6 games, you can see a pattern clearly appear in what the managers want the players to feel at any given moment. The first game is designed to send a clear message, which is exactly why they keep using it. You can die at any moment, and the only way to survive is by following orders exactly. It makes sense that the toughest vote will be after this game, since everyone is shell-shocked. But they should also be well on the way to unquestioningly following orders. The second game, by comparison, is one that's possible for every single player to survive. After the absolute capricious brutality of the first game, this game convinces every winner that they're in charge of their own fate, and convinces them that they're going to be able to win their way through everything based on their own talents. The third game is when the hammer comes down. It exists to accomplish 3 things. 1. Cut the number of players in half. 2. Encourage players to self-sort into teams so they'll rely on one another. 3. Make sure only the toughest and most desperate people survive into the next rounds. This serves the purpose of making things more manageable for the last few games, and encouraging the players to imagine that they can get through things if they're strong and they work together. Now that mental state is turned against them immediately in the marble game, where they're likely to team up with whoever they felt closest to after the winnowing caused by the tug of war and the nighttime massacre. Then they're forced to kill whoever they're closest to, leaving them completely alienated. At this point, it might be clear that most people aren't getting out of the game alive, and the logical thing to do would be to quit. But the players have become so atomized from one another that even the idea of creating an alliance to leave would never occur to them. Then they get hit with Game 5, which exists only to kill off the vast majority of the remaining players, so that just a handful are left to play the Squid game. The genius of the glass steps is that you can shorten or extend the bridge to adjust to the number of players who survived the previous games. Had the husband not killed himself, there would have been 19 steps instead of 18, for example. What's clever about the glass steps is that every time someone fails, the next person automatically makes it one step further. As the math teacher points out, 50% of people are going to die in their first step, 75% on their second, 82% on the third, and so forth. So all you have to do is make it 2 or 3 plates longer than the number of players, and you'll ensure that even if nobody starts killing other players, only 3 or 4 people are going to make it to the other side. The games in Squid Game 2 follow the same pattern. Red light, green light is exactly the same, of course. Then the 6-legged race offers the same concept of Dalgona, in that theoretically, every single player could survive the game. Interestingly, they've decided to start the team play early this time, so that when we get to the game of Mingle, you've already got players committed to their teams. Now that's another team-focused game, one designed not only to winnow the playing field down to just 100 players, making it even more brutal than Tug of War, but also to reinforce partnerships. The game has to end with 2 people depending on one another to survive, forging an instant bond. If the similarities hold, then when we finally get around to seeing Game 4, it should revolve around betraying that bond again. It's too bad that 456 hadn't thought more about the nature and purpose of the games he played, or at least he would have been able to warn players about the type of experience they were going to get into next. I'm not sure that telling people that at least half of them were guaranteed to die in Game 3 would have helped sway things towards a leave vote, but it would have been nice to see him try. Famously, in the first Squid game, the tiles of the bunkhouse were decorated with images of all of the games. I'm guessing we're supposed to believe that 456 either didn't notice, because of the stress of the final night before Squid Game, or simply forgot that detail in the years afterwards, since checking the walls isn't his first move when he arrives in the new bunkhouse. We can check though, and by doing so, get 2 hints about what's coming next. Running along the top of the wall near the ceiling are images of people seemingly hanging from or swinging between a series of spikes, so don't be surprised if monkey bars or swinging from ropes play a role in the future. Then we have an enormous mirrored chessboard-looking set of squares that has crosses sticking out of certain squares. Is this suggesting another dangerous floor game, only larger and more complex? And are the crosses marking which squares were dangerous for anyone smart enough to be paying attention to them? Interestingly, these are the only images visible on the walls so far. We've got no sign of any pictograms representing the games we've already seen, unless I missed a shot somewhere. The biggest clue that the boat captain is working for the Frontman is that the detective hasn't found the island in 2 years of looking. The man knew how long he was on the ferry, exactly where it was launched from, and it's easy enough to find the ferry's top speed. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of islands off the coast of Korea, it's just that the man has spent 2 years worth of weekends looking. If someone wasn't actively sabotaging him, he would have found the island by now. In fact, I think there's a chance he actually found the island already. He just doesn't know it. Simply put, if you're trying to keep someone from finding a secret hiding place, what is the best way to conceal it? The answer, of course, is to put it directly under the person's nose, and then have that person dismiss it. When they're following the tracker, they're directed to an island. The boat captain says that the island used to have people living on it, but it's now uninhabited, and people just go there to fish off the shore. So now we have to ask ourselves, what are you expecting to find on a Squid Game island? Definitely a dock, some kind of roads, at least a few buildings, maybe a helicopter pad, but it would probably be camouflaged when not in use. The island they're heading to, by virtue of being formerly inhabited, will definitely have all of the features that they're looking for, and would obviously be worth searching. But they don't search it, because when they follow their tracker, it leads them to a fisherman who explains that he was given a tub of bait by a stranger on the dock before boarding a boat to the island. This causes them to dismiss the island, as they realize they were found out and assume they were led in the wrong direction, leaving them with like a dozen other islands they need to quickly search. The boat captain prepped them for what they would find on the island, and when they find exactly what he predicted, they dismiss the island and move on. But what if that's exactly what the captain wanted them to do? Is that a stretch? Sure, but given how good the villains are at managing people, this could easily turn out to be Squid Game Island. There's certainly nothing that visually distinguishes it from the island we saw at night in Season 1. For the most part, the games in Squid Game take place over extremely short periods of time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. They may be horrifying, but at least they're over fast. The longest game in the first series was Tug of War, where the whole game, going up, getting chained in, having a tug of war, getting released and coming back down, all took about 10 minutes. With 4 matches, that's still under an hour. Then we have the 6-legged race, which is just a crazy endurance nightmare for some of the teams. There are 74 teams of 5 people playing the game. There are 2 courses, so 2 teams participate at once, for 37 heats, which last 5 minutes each. But, and this is key, there's also a reset between heats. Say 2 minutes to get your team up to the starting line and put into shackles, then another 2 minutes to get unshackled and leave if you win. So that is 7 raw minutes to get shackled and play the game. Right there, you've got 259 minutes just for everybody to play. But then we have to consider the longer reset when somebody gets killed. We know that 22 teams get killed in the 6-legged race. Let's assume that in 50% of those cases, both teams in a heat were eliminated, and in 50%, only one team was eliminated. That doesn't break down evenly, of course. So let's assume that it was the shorter option, and 12 of those teams were killed in 6 heats, with 10 getting killed across the other 10 heats. So that's 16 heats in which there were dead bodies to deal with. The upside, for those heats, we don't have to factor in unshackling and exiting time, since that happens while the bodies are getting carried away. So in 21 heats, nobody died. We add 42 minutes for unshackling and the players leaving the room in those heats, for a running total of 301 minutes. Then we've got the 16 heats where people died. We can assume 10 minutes to bring the coffins in, unshackle the corpses, load the corpses into the coffins, then carry the coffins out. I'm not going to double the time for the 6 heats in which both teams died, since I'm assuming they could just send in twice as many workers and completed the work in the same amount of time. Even giving them the benefit of the doubt, an extra 10 minutes has to be added for 15 of the heats. One of those teams died in the last round, so we don't have to count that cleanup, which means we're adding 150 minutes to the game, for a grand total of 451 minutes. Now we add in the 10 minutes people took to choose a team, and we're at the final number. 461 minutes. That's right. By the time 456's team got up to play, they had been in that room for 7 hours and 34 minutes. I'm amazed their legs still worked. Did they stop for lunch? Hand out water bottles? Were there bathroom breaks? Inquiring minds want to know. Just how many employees are there on the island? The real answer, of course, is that the number is as many as the plot requires, but it's worth taking a look at the few facts we know about the size of the organization. First, the workers. The vans each have 4 or 5 people in them. We know it can be 5 because the worker that the detective kills isn't shocked when he sees 3 people in the back row of the van. We can also assume, based on the fact that everyone is taken on a single night, and a trip to Squid Island involves a ferry ride, that no vans were going back for a second trip that night, which means if there's an average of 4.5 players in the van, then you have 455 players delivered to the island, you need 101 vans, which means we can confirm 101 workers just tasked with collecting contestants. I decided to indulge my obsessiveness and count all of the workers who appear in this shot of the contestant prep room. It's 163 guys, and this is just 200 of the contestants being attended to. There could be another room like this of equal size with another 100 plus workers. So when you think about the vans, when you think about the people stripping down bodies and putting on their costumes, we've got at least 300 workers on the island. Soldiers are much harder to judge since we only ever see a few of them at a time. This shot of the soldier hallway from Season 2 establishes the hallway is featuring exactly 24 rooms. We know this because when the odd number soldiers walk away from the camera, 23 is the last in line. Of course, there have to be a bunch more than 24 based on what we see in the rebellion. So let's take a look at the rebellion. We see 14 soldiers get killed, but then 5 manage to escape, suggesting there were actually 19 soldiers, 14 getting killed that we can confirm right now. Let's see how many get killed during the assault on the control center. Obviously, we can't tell the soldiers apart, so what we're going to do is count the number who get killed here, and then see how many living soldiers we can see afterwards. We see 10 soldiers get shot during the rebellion, and this is the last shot we see of the opposing force on the other side of the wall. There's 20 more guys, but one of these guys actually gets killed. So that's 19 more living guys. Then we see 4 guys coming up behind them. And at the same time, we see another 10 guards come in with the manager to secure the bunkhouse. This leads to a grand total of 24 guards killed in the rebellion, and 33 more guards visible afterwards. So that's 57 guards specifically that we know about. As for commanders, there's no conceivable way to guess how many of them there are. We only ever see 1 per group of soldiers. We see 36 in the command center, but there's gotta be more. We know 5 get killed in the rebellion, but that's it. My final estimate is somewhere around 300 workers, 100 guards, probably not more than 50 commanders. I don't believe they're all working in the control room, but I also don't think there's a lot more than the guys who work in the control room. Plus Frontman and Black Square, of course. I'm guessing the VIP waiters are drawn from the existing staff, rather than being brought in special, but the painted people are likely just there for the day. But are there special painters on the island doing that airbrushing work? Damn. When you start thinking about the real size of this operation, it can lead to madness really quickly. So that's Season 2 of Squid Game. As The Empire Strikes Back to Squid Game's Star Wars, we were never going to get a pat ending on this one, but even for the dark middle chapter, this was incredibly bleak. Still, it absolutely lived up to the expectations set up by the first season, and I can't wait for the grand finale later this year. For now, though, I've been the Hidden Object Guru. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time and you'd like to see more, there's buttons coming up to help you with that. Questions, comments, your own Squid Game observations, go in the comments section below the video. Play my game, Clown in the Woods, over at itch.io for free. We'll see you back here for more Squid Game, but until then I'll say that's right. Au revoir.